This week, we're going cyber as I talk about why Cyberpunk 2077 is no longer on the PlayStation Store. So let's go ahead together as a people and check it out. And welcome to another sensational Sunday. This is Mike, and this is Mike Texted Out, and this week I'm talking about the whole ordeal with Cyberpunk 2077 being pulled from the PlayStation Store. But before I hop into it, I just want to say that this is not going to be a critique of the game as far as gameplay or story, because I think that's a matter of opinion. And also, I personally have been playing and enjoying the game on PC. I've only played about 4 hours so far, and I've run into a few minor glitches, but it's been mostly playable for me. And like I said, I have been enjoying it, so I do want to get that out of the way first. But it's not really about me, it's about what other people have been experiencing. So before we even get to this point where we talk about why the game was pulled from PlayStation, we got to talk about all the issues that led up to this point, starting with before the game even came out. So there was a lot of stuff with the game being delayed. Originally it was supposed to come out in April, then it got delayed until September, and then it got delayed until November, and then it got delayed until December 10th. The last delay, that was the one where I was like, okay, why are you delaying it for 3 weeks? That doesn't make any sense. What are you really doing in 3 weeks that's gonna majorly change the trajectory of this game? So that was already a red flag right there. The last delay especially, I was like, okay, now, this is kind of what are you really going to fix in this amount of time? I mean, they could have, made some major fix or just been on the verge of some major fix that would have improved the experience. But I don't know, that was kind of a red flag to me. The other thing was they met with Kotaku in 2019 about crunch, and they said that they really try to avoid it and set an example for the industry. If you're not familiar with crunch, it's basically having to work extra hours to get a game completed or to get a project completed. And a lot of game studios, they make it mandatory that you have to work, 6 days a week, 60, 70, 80 hours a week if it's something that really needs to be completed on time. So they interviewed with Kotaku and they were like, yeah, it's all voluntary. We really try to make sure that we don't do crunch unless we absolutely have to. And then later it came out when the game was having development issues. They're like, pretty much everybody got to crunch. You crunching. If you ain't crunching, you're doing setups. They already had to backpedal on that. So they was already looking kind of doubty. And they said that, everybody was going to have to crunch for a year in order to get this game out on time. So the developers put in a lot of hard work on this game and had to work extra hours to even make the deadline, to get it out at the time that they did. And then even before the game came out, they didn't even have a seizure warning in the game. And apparently there's a scene in the game that can easily induce seizures because it uses the same kind of lighting that doctors use to induce seizures. And that really scared me personally. If the reviewers hadn't caught that and it went out, that could have caused some major issues. If you don't know, I'm married and my partner actually does have epilepsy, and he really wanted to play the game. And I was like, wait a minute. I was like, oh, wait a minute. I don't want you having a seizure trying to play this game. So they did get that added by the time the game released, but that was another thing that I was like, how you gonna miss? That's kind of a big thing to miss right there, especially in a game that has flashing lights to begin with, because it's the whole cyberpunk theme. And this is just kind of a sparse timeline of what happened leading up to the game coming out. So it got delayed 3 times. They reported people were having to do crunch, and then there was a whole seizure warning, and there was also some other quality issues before the game even came out that was being reported by the reviewers. The game came out December 10th, and immediately there was major glitches. There was a bunch of videos online. And when I say major glitches, I'm talking about major glitches. So yeah, if you haven't heard about it, there was a little bit of things where people's private and personal areas were not staying inside of the clothing. There was just other glitches in the world, weird stuff happening. Personally, I experienced a few glitches. I didn't run into anything major or game breaking. There was one scene at the beginning where they're trying to hand you this drive. It looks kind of like a flash drive that has a training module loaded on it. And in the scene when I watched it, he didn't have anything in his fingers until it got to the point where the dialogue came up to decide if I was going to do the training missions or not. And then there was another scene earlier in the game in the club where someone T-posed. But other than that, I haven't seen anything that's been noticeable. For me personally, I haven't even seen the glitch where, the private parts come out. So there was a lot of reports of the game being buggy. People were unhappy about it. And I will say this, like, it didn't stop me from buying the game. I didn't buy the game until after it came out and I, watched the reviews. And I still made my decision to go ahead and buy it because I was like, you know what, if it's buggy, it'll get fixed eventually. I really just want to try it the way it is because I was a huge Deus Ex fan. I understand it's not the same developer or studio or anything, but I really like that atmosphere, so I was kind of excited for the game. And I think on top of that, people just being stuck in the house and looking for stuff to do, and this game being like one of the most anticipated games of the year, of course I wanted to try it, and I wanted to see how the ray tracing looked on my PC, which it looks good, but I can't get anything above 30 frames per second on my RTX 2070. Well, above 40, I can get like around 38 in the max. Aside from that though, without ray tracing on, I'm able to play it just fine on PC. Jeff did try it. His PC has a 1080 Ti, so it runs it at 1440p without any issues. So as far as me and glitches, I'm like, whatever, as long as it's not a glitch that completely breaks the game, I'm fine with glitches. And I think that's how a lot of people looked at it too. We were all seeing the stuff that was funny, and then it was like, well, I'm just gonna go ahead and buy it anyway. But the thing that I didn't realize is what was going on with the baseline PS4 and Xbox One. Like, the game is barely playable from a frame rate standpoint. Like, it barely at times hits 30, which 30 is generally considered to be playable. Most of the time it was like in the high 20s. Digital Foundry actually did a video about it that I watched because I was curious, because I don't have a PS4 or an Xbox One anymore, like a baseline one. I have the PS4 Pro and I have the Xbox One X. So I watched the video and I was like, yeah, that's rough. And even from the frame rate standpoint, the game runs at an extremely low resolution. I mean, not like extreme, not like 480p or anything, but it's below 1080p to begin with. And then on top of that, it's the frame rate that's terrible. And then I feel like because of the performance issues, the glitches and the hookups are even worse. So CD Projekt RED responded, by saying like, if you have a PS4 or Xbox One, we'll give you a refund for the physical copy of it, and you pretty much gonna go through Microsoft or Sony to get refunded for the digital copy. And basically, if you want to wait for the fixes, we're doing a major patch in January and then another one in February. So yeah, the performance up there is so bad that it's literally unplayable, and I think that's what the issue is. The PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X are at least playable at around 1080p resolution, a little bit above 1080p, and it gets a steady 30 frames. Of course, like the PS5 and the Xbox Series X can run it at around 60 frames, so performance isn't as much of an issue there. But the people that are on the base model from last generation are just like, it's pretty much not playable for them right now. And Microsoft and Sony had to decide, what to do as far as the refund on their end, because they both have their separate refund policies in place. Microsoft decided to just, for now, just to offer everybody refunds. Like, no matter how much you played it or how long you've had it, you can get a refund for it if you purchase it digitally. Sony took a more extreme approach, and they went ahead and pulled the game from the PlayStation Store altogether, and then they're also offering refunds. I think in both cases it was right to offer a refund, because the thing is, if you have a console, it's not like you can go in there and tweak the settings, especially the base model one. It doesn't even have performance mode or anything like the Pro models did. So it's like you can go in there and tweak the settings and get the game to run better. If you have a PS4 or an Xbox One and you buy a game on that platform, it should perform the way that you expect it to. Like, it should be playable. So the fact that it is not playable, I definitely agree with both Sony and Microsoft offering the refund. As far as Sony pulling the game, I know a lot of people were mad about it, and people were like, oh, Skyrim had glitches and, Fallout and stuff when they came out, which is true. But it's really not about the glitches, it's about the performance, because you can live with glitches as long as the game still works and there's no like game-breaking glitches, which I heard that there are in some cases. But like I said, from my experience, it was playable. So if the game was playable and like maybe it has some glitches, that'd be different. But the fact that the game is not playable, that's the key component to the whole thing. The Sony thing is a little weird because technically the game's playable on PS5, but them pulling it from the store, because there's no actual PS5 version of the game yet, because that's not coming out until later, that actually got delayed. The PS5 and Xbox Series X versions were like ray tracing and all the enhancements. So they're also pulling it from PS5 players to purchase. Of course, you can always go and buy a physical copy. CD Projekt RED came out and said that they're still going to update the version of the game anyway for people who still have it, and if you buy a physical copy. But that will make the Sony thing a little bit weird. But I can also understand them pulling it for now, because they don't want people to go and buy it, and then they're going to have to deal with even more refunds. It's just really going to back them up even more, like from a support standpoint. They got to pay for people to work in customer service, to do these refunds that people decide to call. It's just going to put more strain on their system. So it's probably just easier for them to pull the game completely until it's fixed. And then, there might be people that still want a refund, but it'll probably be like the normal amount of people versus like, everybody at the same time is hitting us for a refund because this game doesn't run on their PS4. So I can understand that standpoint of them pulling it completely. Who knows if Microsoft changes their stance, or as of right now, you can still buy it. And that's probably because it does work on the Series X. So I can understand why they wouldn't want to, pull it completely if people on the Series X do want to play it. So in my opinion, I feel like Sony just pulled the game completely because there's no PS5 version. And I already heard that there was like weird stuff with their store, like how it's handling like PS5 and PS4 versions of the game. So they just might not have had an easy way to just prevent it from being downloaded on PS4 and not PS5. So I just think that they went ahead and pulled it. And then also if they took away the PS4 version, then also wouldn't work on the PS4 Pro either, which the game technically runs up there as well. So I think their decision to just pull it all together was just like, there's no easy way to just sell it to PS5 players because it's a PS4 game. Versus if they did have the PS5 version out, they might have just pulled the PS4 version and not the PS5 version. So I can understand it from both standpoints. I know a lot of people were getting mad about it, but I'm like, if the game's not playable, people shouldn't buy it. The thing is, if you wait for them to fix it, like if you do have a PS4, which I'm sure they probably will, then you'd be better off just waiting to buy the game anyway, because you can probably get it for a discount by that point, at least for the physical copy, I'm gonna guess. Usually the physical copies go on sale pretty soon after release, like a month or two, so by that time you could probably buy the physical copy for cheaper. And then it also just sucks from the standpoint of like, let's say if you do have a PS4 and Xbox One, and that's your only system, you don't have a PC or anything else, everything's sold out right now. So it's not like you can even upgrade and get a PS5. Even the PS4 Pro is pretty difficult to find, and it would be stupid to buy a PS4 Pro at this point because the PS5 is already out. So it would literally be a waste of money. So it's not like the people who have those consoles can just go out and upgrade. Like you can't even buy a new graphics card. And even the old graphics cards are sold out. So there's no way to even get upgraded hardware to be able to play this game well at this point. And as far as CD Projekt RED releasing the game in the first place when they knew that it was in this condition, like there's no way that they released it and they didn't know that it wasn't playable on the regular Xbox One and the PS4. My opinion, they should have just not released those versions, like delayed them until they figured out a way to either get it working properly on those systems or do some kind of streaming version of the game on those systems maybe, but they shouldn't have released it like that. And I know that they released it like that because they already delayed this game and it was supposed to come out in spring, so they probably already messed up their projections for their financials. And I know that they probably wanted to get it out this year, so just had to release it as is so they wouldn't mess up their financials. I don't think it had anything to do with them like meeting consumer demand. I mean, of course it did, but I don't think the consumers played any role in them releasing the game in the States. I just think that they want to get it out this year for their financials. They could have just released the game for PC, PS5, and Series X and be like, hey, we had to delay the PS4 and Xbox version until further notice, but we're working on getting it out there as soon as possible. People would have been mad about it, but it would have been the right thing to do. But from a financial standpoint, considering that the PS4 last generation had the largest install base, they'd be losing out on a lot of potential sales because even though the PS5 and Xbox Series X are selling, they've sold out, but there are nowhere near as many out there as the PS4 or the Xbox One at this point in time in history. So from day one sales standpoint, they would have lost a lot of money by not having it available on PS4 and Xbox One. And I'm not even justifying them releasing it because in my opinion, they shouldn't have released those versions of the game. But I think that's probably what led to their decision just to go ahead and be like, we're going to release this broken game anyway on these consoles where it's not playable. So yep, that's the whole story. In my opinion, they should have just not released those versions of the game until they were ready. I'd rather them take the time they need to make sure that they release a game that works than to kind of release what they did, at least for the PS4 and the Xbox version. Like I said, from my experience, playing it on PC, it's fine. It doesn't run the greatest for the hardware. I'm sure there's still more optimizing they need to do even for PC, but it works fine. And for what I've seen of the other versions of the game, it's still playable. I'm just specifically talking about the PS4 and Xbox One, the baseline consoles. So yeah, overall, I think Sony made the right decision. I think both Sony and Microsoft made the right decision. They made different decisions, but they were both the right decision. I can understand Sony is still technically a smaller company than Microsoft, so I think just having to deal with like people potentially still buying the game for PS4, because a lot of people just don't follow games media, and they might see like, oh, this game is really popular, I'm gonna buy it, and not realize what's going on, and try to play it and like, this game runs like crap, I'm gonna get my refund. So I think just to avoid the headaches of having to deal with people, and then plus their install base is a lot bigger than Microsoft as far as consoles. So I just think like, as far as having to deal with consumers and them potentially buying the game without knowing and then getting a refund, and that being a whole thing that happens until February when the final patch is out for the performance issues, they just don't want to deal with it, so they just went ahead and pulled it, and that makes sense. But overall, let me know what you think. Have you played Cyberpunk 2077? Have you experienced any of these issues? What do you think about Sony pulling the game completely? Please let me know. And I will be back on Wednesday. I'm going to tell you why I went back to the AirPods Pros over the Sony WF-1000X and 3s. But until then, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to tell a friend, tell a coworker, like, share, and subscribe, and always do at least 2 things at the same time. Peace.